A lot's changed in 1 year, hasn't it? I think what's most relevant for pharmacists is how COVID-19 vaccine policy has evolved since administration took office in 2025. One of the clearest signals has been a pullback in federal investment in mRNA vaccine platforms. In fact, an estimated reduction or sometimes a redirection of funding is on the order of several hundred million to potentially over $1 billion, affecting mRNA research, pandemic preparedness, and really next generation vaccine development. I think the second most important was the FDA. So the FDA has implemented more restrictive age and risk-focused labeling language for COVID-19 vaccines. So while COVID-19 vaccines do remain licensed for individuals 6 months of age and older, current labeling now emphasizes universal for age 65 and above, but for those less than 65, it's really only with underlying conditions that increase the risk for severe COVID disease. So for pharmacists, those distinctions matter because labeling often drives payer coverage, protocol development, and perceived clinical priority among their patients, even when the indication technically remains broad. And I think the last and probably the most significant most recently was the CDC updated the child and adolescent immunization schedule in January, repositioning COVID-19 vaccination away from a clearly universal routine recommendation for children. The schedule now emphasizes individual risk assessment through shared clinical decision-making, rather than including COVID-19 vaccination alongside other universally recommended pediatric vaccines. So I think, put it all together, the funding restrictions and narrower FDA indications and CDC schedule changes reflect really a systematic reframing of how COVID-19 vaccines are positioned within the U.S. public health system, with real downstream implications for pharmacy practice and vaccine confidence. I think it's really important to understand how this happens. From a legal and regulatory standpoint, only the FDA has the ability to authorize, approve, restrict, or withdraw a vaccine from the U.S. market. Neither the HHS leadership nor CDC recommendations can independently remove an FDA-approved product. However, pharmacists understand there's an important distinction between a formal market removal and practical access. Even when a product remains FDA approved, changes in recommendations, coverage policy, procurement, and even public messaging can significantly limit real-world availability. In the near term, the more realistic concern is probably not the sudden market withdrawal, but a progressive narrowing of indications, recommendations, or payer coverage, which really can effectively reduce access and uptake, even without an official removal of the vaccine. Yeah, I think it's important to realize that across pharmacy and infectious disease and other medical communities, there is strong alignment around maintaining universal access to COVID-19 vaccines. We continue to view COVID-19 vaccines as safe, effective, and a critical tool for preventing future pandemics. The prevailing sentiment is that access should remain broad and uncomplicated. Where concern arises is not with the science, because the science continues to support vaccination, but with policies that create artificial barriers to access and introduce ambiguity for patients and providers. We all recognize that once access and messaging becomes fragmented, vaccination rates decline and preventable hospitalizations and unfortunately death increases. So really, in short, pharmacy and the medical community are united in the view that COVID-19 vaccines should remain readily available to all patients, and any changes need to be supported by clear, publicly available, evidence-based guidance. Well, I think from a clinical standpoint, removing mRNA vaccines and that platform would reduce the option available to patients dramatically, especially for young children. mRNA technology enables rapid strain updates, scalable manufacturing. In other words, we can ramp up production very quickly, and a future for multiple antigen formulations. This platform is very flexible We may see, instead of getting multiple shots for respiratory season, you may only need one shot in the future. So there are definitely advantages to this platform. Operationally, though, pharmacists would face significant disruption, changes to product availability, right? Because it would go from 3 vaccine products to 1. Payer coverage may change, protocols would have to be changed, and potential for product shortages with only 1 vaccine on the market. So longer term, platform instability really risks slowing vaccine innovation. If investment in mRNA technology becomes uncertain, it affects not only COVID-19 vaccines, but future products targeting respiratory viruses, oncology, and emerging infectious threats. I think you're right. I mean, the discussions are already impacting public health, and really they're doing it by introducing uncertainty into vaccine confidence, including among healthcare professionals. So, really, what alignment looks like, it requires a government to adhere to principles that pharmacists depend on. For example, transparent, evidence based thresholds for policy changes, not just somebody's opinion. Independent scientific review, which is insulated from political influence, and really clear differentiation between known rare risks and uncertainty. That's a big difference there. And then stable, clear guidance so pharmacists can reliably vaccinate patients. Pharmacists, as you mentioned, are uniquely positioned to translate evidence into patient decisions. But that role only is effective when policy signals are consistent, when they're evidence based, and when they are clearly communicated.